Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about my October wrap-up, which is gonna be the first one in a couple months that I'm actually getting out in a timely manner. And it's not even because I want to put pressure on myself to do things on a timeline. It's genuinely because I don't like waiting too long because I want to be able to come to you and give you my feelings while they're still pretty fresh on the books. I don't like looking back more than a month and a half and trying to remember what I felt at the time while I was reading something so that I can give you my honest opinion. And so the closer I can do it to the end of a month, the better I think it is for being able to communicate with you about those books. With that being said though, I cannot even emphasize enough how fantastic of a reading month October was for me. And not because of numbers or anything, but just because the books were so good. I did finish 9 things, which is a lot for me, but it's mostly just the fact that I was hitting banger after banger after banger at the start of this month, and then overall I had a bunch of 5 stars. There's only one thing that kind of disappointed me this month, but aside from that, even the things that weren't 5 stars, I was really enjoying what I was reading. So I am going to go back to my classic style of doing things in order of rating. So we will start with the lowest and we'll move our way all the way up to the highest. And the highest, I had 4 5-star books this month. So that is a straight up half of what I read. So we're not gonna stay in the low ratings for long. But let's get started. So the very first book we are going to talk about is When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. And this is a book that I gave 3 stars on Goodreads, but realistically and on Storygraph where they let you do half and quarter stars, this was a 2.75. And it's for the simple reason that I really liked the concept, but not the execution in this book. And at the same time as saying that, I really felt like it promised something with the title and the blurb that it didn't actually deliver on in the book. And so I don't want to explicitly spoil the book because it is pretty short, but that's the best reasoning that I can give you without spoiling what happens, is just the fact that I was really hoping that this was going to be something else, and with the fact also that it's a horror, I don't know if it's a novella or a novel, I guess it's a novel, but it's a horror novel, and so I was hoping that it was gonna go harder, and I was hoping that it was gonna do some stuff. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely horrifying things depicted in here, and that goes back to thinking that the concept is really, really high quality, but it just didn't, I don't know, maybe I was just misinterpreting from the start what the author's intent was, and so I don't think that it's bad, and I do think that a lot of people would really get a lot of enjoyment out of this if they have the right expectations going in, but I didn't, and I was disappointed about things that didn't happen. So unfortunately this one just didn't really end up working for me. It was just okay. I felt very neutral about it. Next up, we have a couple of books that I gave 3.75 stars to, and the first of those is Bunny by Mona Awad. And so I actually just spoke about this book in some detail in a book that I just posted, or in a video, sorry, that I just posted with my spooky recommendations from this spooky season, my favorite things that I read. And so I think that this is really good. And the reason that I say it that way is because I didn't exactly enjoy reading this, but I found what it was doing fascinating and interesting. So our main character in this book, Samantha, is in a master's program for English and for kind of writing, and the 4 other people in her program are 4 girls who are very, very close friends with each other, and they call each other the Bunnies, and they extend Samantha an invitation to come join them for an evening. And when Samantha actually takes them up on their invitation, she discovers that things in this group are just very weird and a lot of strange things are going on. And this book is definitely horror and magical realism, and it reads like a fever dream. And that was part of the difficulty for me, is that I'm not a reader who's very good at visualizing things, and so when something reads like a fever dream, I feel very unmoored and adrift, and trying to get my bearings. And so I do think that was purposeful, but I also don't know that I got out like everything that I could out of the book just because of that nature of it. But I still think it was good, and I would recommend it so that people can experience it and form their own interpretations of it. Next up, we had a book that I feel like surprised some people to see me reading when I posted about it on Instagram, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So to be honest with you, this is a book that ever since it came out has obviously been like on my radar just because of how popular it's been and continues to be. But it was one of those things where I always was like, well, I could read it someday. Like, it's not that I'm never gonna read it, it's just not a priority for me right now. But then it turned out that like at least 5 people that I know in real life, probably more than that, like in between 5 and 10 people that I know in real life were reading this series like right now. And so I got major FOMO and I was like, well, I'm gonna read it right now too, because like, if not now, then when? Like, when else am I gonna have so many people that I could talk about this with if I wanted? So I thought it was a great time for that. And I did give it 3.75 stars. This is the second of the 2 books that I gave 3.75 stars, and I had fun. Like, I liked it. This is, I don't even know if this needs a description from me because of how popular it is, but this is fantasy. This is the story of our main character, Feyre, who lives in a small cottage with her family, and she like hunts and everything to like help her family subsist. She's kind of like the main provider for them. Like her father has a disability, and her sisters and him, like they all rely on her. And one day she accidentally kills a fairy in the forest, or a fae, who has taken the form of a wolf. And basically she is made to come with one of the high fae to the fae kingdoms and out of the human world to basically atone for her crimes of killing a fae. And it goes from there. She, like, I don't know. I don't want to say beyond that really, because that's the basic premise. And if you're someone who still hasn't read this like I was, I don't want to just spoil it for you on the assumption that it's so popular that people know. But it has a lot of romance, but I thought that the romance, like, okay, so in the first half of the book, I really enjoyed the romance. In the second half of the book, I thought things got a little bit more corny, but I actually really enjoyed a lot of the world building early on. I enjoyed a lot of the magic and how that type of thing was described. I didn't love the second half of the book as much, but I still had fun. Like, I was still engaged, I guess, the whole time. I wanted to keep reading it. I wanted to find out what was going to happen. And like, that's really all you can ask for basic enjoyment of a book. There was one thing that irked me though, and it was the continual reference in Feyre's perspective to lights and colors and shapes, and like how she sees colors because like she likes to paint. And the thing is, it's not the fact of that like that bothers me, it's how it was done, because it was so repetitive. And like, I know that some people are gonna say that Sarah J. Maas is not the best writer, but like on the whole, her prose being fairly basic, it doesn't bother me. It only bothers me when something shows up like that, where it's extremely repetitive and she's not a strong enough writer in her like art and like craft of it that she can't figure out a different way to say it. And if she was able to more artfully describe like a painter's perspective and how Feyre sees the world, it probably wouldn't have bothered me. But, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the phrase, I saw the colors and shapes, and like that exact phrasing came up like over and over again. I was like, I'm gonna put my head through a wall if she looks at something one more time and thinks about the color and the shape of it. Like, seriously, it's bad. So I was annoyed at that, but the majority of the other stuff, I enjoyed it. I didn't put too much pressure on the book. I just had fun with it and I liked it. So I am continuing in the series. I only own the first 2 books so far because I really want to see what I think of the second one before I make a decision on continuing. So yeah, it was good. Okay, next up we have a book that I gave a 4.25 stars or a Goodreads 4 to, and that is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. And this is actually another book that I spoke about in some detail in my spooky reads recommendations video. But essentially, the concept of Midnight is the Darkest Hour is that we have our two main characters, Ruth, who is the son of the preacher in this isolated religious Louisiana town, and our second main character, Everett, who is like the boy from the wrong side of the tracks, is how he's described in the blurb. And so they kind of have this unlikely friendship, and they've been friends for a few years now. And the inciting incident in this book is that we start to discover in this small town that there have been murders going on. And the reason that these weren't really discovered to this point is because this small town is surrounded by like woodlands and dangerous swamps, and it's sort of accepted that sometimes people will go missing, or sometimes people might have an accident and nobody like really questions how they died. But it kind of comes to light that a bunch of these people that have gone missing, it's realized that they've actually been being murdered, and not just dying, but being murdered. And so Ruth and Everett are sort of like uniquely positioned to maybe know something about these murders, or to be able to solve them. And we sort of follow them, and we discover more about their friendship, and we also discover more about their history, because we have a present timeline and a past timeline. And I believe they are around 23 in the present timeline, and we jump back to when they're like in their teens. And I think we jump back further with Ruth, because with her father being the preacher and such a powerful man in this town, we learn a little bit more about her childhood and how their family is and has come to be, like who they are. But this I gave a 4.25 star to, because I genuinely really loved the first half of this book. When we're trying to kind of start unraveling the mystery, and we have like some suggestion of romance going on. And the thing that kind of knocked this down for me, but not too far, is that it just didn't end up being what I hoped it was going to be. I thought that the story was going to end up going in a certain direction, and for the most part it did, but on one key like hinge point it went in a different direction, kind of the opposite of what I was hoping for. And so I was a little bit disappointed, even though I actually think that it was a good decision for the book that like Ashley Winstead wanted to write. Like, looking at it objectively, I think that it was the right decision for the book. It's just that it's not what I wanted. So that's why this is a 4.25 and not higher, but I would still definitely recommend this, because I do think that it is really well done, and I'm going to continue reading from Ashley Winstead for sure. Okay, next up, before we get to the 5 stars, we have one 4.5 star read, and that is Stoner by John Williams. And so I'm not going to say too much about this, because I am going to have a dedicated video for this, because this was the Reading Booktuber's favorite books pick for the month of October, which was recommended to me by Joanna. And I'm so grateful that she did, because this is the type of book where it's sort of like something that I knew about, seeing as it is a classic, but it wasn't one that I ever felt a particular pull to read. But I am so happy that I did, and that I got the chance to. So to put it simply, Stoner by John Williams really just follows the life of our main character, William Stoner. And like, he is born a farmer. That's what his parents did. He was raised on a farmstead, and he ends up going to the University of Missouri. I'm pretty sure it's the University of Missouri. It doesn't even say on the back, actually. Not that it like particularly is critical that it's that university, but his family sends him there because they have a course on agriculture, and they think that it will help him on the farm, and it will help there's knowledge that they think that they could gain from this. And basically, Stoner goes to university, and he falls in love with English and English literature, and he wants to stay. He wants to further his studies, and that's kind of like what happens early on in the book and kicks off into the rest of his life. And it really is the life of the character of Stoner, and it sounds so like simple to put it like that, but it really is a character study. It is based on the interpersonal relationships and the emotions of his life and the decisions that he makes and who he tries to be and how he changes over the years. And it was riveting, honestly. It was extremely well written, and at first I was worried that I wouldn't be able to emotionally connect, but John Williams' writing is just so simple but also so emotional that it was phenomenal. And the last thing that I will say is that if you are someone who is really, really interested in English literature or who like studies literature in general, I absolutely think you should read this, because it was clear to me that John Williams is very educated on the topic, and when things come up of like discussions at the university level and academic level discussions, I found them extremely interesting and valuable, and I think that if you're somebody who is into this like type of topic, you would find it extremely interesting as well. Okay, we've entered the 5-star range, so realistically these are in no particular order because they're all 5 stars and they were all things that I really loved. However, I obviously have to talk about them in order anyway, or in an order, so I'll just do it how I have them in the pile. First up is Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the first book of the final trilogy of Realm of the Elderlings, which I can't even believe it when I say that, because it has been such a long journey reading this series, starting in June 2021 when me and Ben read Assassin's Apprentice together, and that was the first time that we really got to know one another, all the way to like 2.5 years later when we're about to be finishing it at the end of 2023. These books and like this series, they're a masterpiece, and especially this first installment of the final trilogy. It was incredible. Like, I'm not going to say anything specific about it really, because this is the 14th book in the Realm of the Elderlings. However, it's the like emotions, it's her skill with just like getting inside of a character's head and having those like incredibly real feeling characters that we've been with for years and years now, and that we just continue to follow them in their lives. And like, I don't know if it's a spoiler to say that the first part of this book spans like a time of life where it's mostly slice of life stuff before the plot of this final trilogy like really kicks off. And you can see how many tabs I put in this, and Fool's Quest and Assassin's Fate I'm 100% certain are going to be the same, because there are just so many moments that I want to remember, or like instances of beautiful writing, or just like emotional moments. And yeah, I can't even express how much I have loved this series and how much I loved this book. It was so good. Next up, we have what was a reread of a favorite for me, and that was The Lies of L Lamora by Scott Lynch. And the motivation for rereading this now was the fact that I was so kindly invited to be involved in a discussion about this book that was on Murphy Napier's review channel, and so I will definitely have that video linked down in my description if you never like got a chance to see it, or if you didn't know that I did that. But it was obviously Murphy, and then Bryce from Shelf Centered, and then Ben from Overly Average Ben, and myself, and the 4 of us discussed this book together, and I had so much fun because I love this book so much, and that experience did not change upon reread. It was 5 stars again. Pretty sure I gave it 5 stars the first time. Like, if not, it was definitely like a 4.5 or above, because it was just as good of an experience. It was honestly even better because I like vaguely remembered what happened, and so I was able to pick up on some foreshadowing and some of the stuff that was coming while still getting like pretty much the full experience, just because it's been like 3 years since I read this. And I'm just so happy that it held up, because it was one of my favorites, and it was like a book that I absolutely loved that I read towards the start of taking recommendations from BookTube. So I really wish that this series was finished, but I'm encouraged by the fact that Scott Lynch is going to be releasing some novellas by all accounts, and so I am really hoping that at some point I can confidently continue, because I had read the first 2 books, but I was scared to read the 3rd one because then there was nothing after that. So, you know, it's a whole thing, but hopefully. But anyway, I love the Lies of L Lamora, and that is the point of this video. Okay, only 2 books left to talk about. So my third 5-star of the month of October was The Aenda by Isabel Cañas, and so this is, I think, the last book I finished, or maybe the second last book, but regardless. I read this in pretty late October, and The Aenda, it takes place in the year 1823, immediately following the Mexican War of Independence, and our main character, Beatriz, her father was executed during the war for being on the wrong side when the tides of power turned, and so her and her mother were staying at a relative's house who, quite frankly, didn't really want them there because her mother's family did not approve of the marriage to her father, but they're relying on the charity of these people. And so when Beatrice sees the chance to get married to this man Rodolfo and potentially provide a home for herself and her mother that is their own, she jumps at the chance and she goes with her new husband to the hacienda in the countryside that he owns, and she quickly discovers that there is something wrong with this house, and there's a mystery of how Rodolfo's previous wife, his first wife, died, and there's a lot to be uncovered here, and that is the basic premise, and obviously it goes from there. But this was literally just everything that I was hoping that it would be in terms of loving the main character, loving the like haunted house vibes and how creepy and spooky it was on page, and loving the romantic elements as well, and also the talk about family and about emotional like motivations for these characters. And this was a book that I really just loved, and I finished this really fast because the final like 150 pages I just absolutely didn't want to stop reading it, and I didn't put it down. The Aenda is also featured in my spooky book racks video if you want to hear more of what I said about it there. Okay, so the final book that I read in the month of October, or like not the final book that I finished, but the final one to talk about, and honestly my throat is getting a little bit scratchy now, so good that we're almost done. And that is The Price of Spring, the final book in the Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. So of course, classic. Can't tell you much about the plot of this one since it is the finale of a quartet, but I can tell you that you need to read the Long Price Quartet if you have not done so, because once again, this was also a reread for me, and the experience rereading this series was just incredible because it is one of the best fantasy series that I have ever read. It is more subtle and understated. It is still like high fantasy and sort of epic as its scope widens with each book, but the real focus is on the characters. It's a multi-generational story. It deals with family and friendships and romance and every basically condition of the human heart. And Daniel Abraham does that so expertly, and he is just like, he is like Robin Hobb levels of realistic characters and creating people who you really believe are truly flawed humans but are fantastic characters to follow. And I truly believe, like, obviously I haven't read the End of Realm of the Elderlings yet, so who knows, but I think that this is the best ending to a series that I have ever read. It has made me cry both times that I've read it, and it is just so perfect and appropriate for the series. It is the entire culmination of the series. It is so emotionally resonant, and it just has the perfect like resolution, and so that makes The Price of Spring an easy 5-star, and just overall this series as a favorite for me. So yeah, just go read it. If you haven't done that, just do it. Okay, so those are all 9 of the books that I finished in the month of October. As you can see, just based on the ratings, I really read some phenomenal books this past month, and I'm sure that you would love them too if you haven't read them, but also if you have, definitely let me know what you think of them down in the comments, or what you think about my feelings on them. I would really love to hear from you. And so that is it for this video. Like I said, my throat is starting to get scratchy, so apparently I can't read 9 books in a month because I don't have the physical ability to talk about them. But I'm glad I did, just because they were all so good. So yeah, with that said, please like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. As always, I'll have my Discord with Ben and my socials linked in the description if you're interested in that stuff. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!